All right, this is Target 36 for Access Knowledge Board Game Allied Headquarters, and I'm gonna continue with the review. I did screw up. I realized that instead of sharing my screen, I was sharing the uh, internet window, so that it stayed on the report. That's not the worst thing in the world because Barney did a great job of reporting, but I obviously I'm tooling around a map that you can't see. But now you'll be able to see it because voila, there's the map. Okay, so where are we? Um, the description from Barney goes something of note from late 43 is the large Allied air presence in Syria. Where did they all come from? See if I can get that. Can't quite see. Oh, it's not as bad as you would think. 6, 4, 2, 1, right there. Okay, so they would continue to have invest heavily in bombers for the duration of the war. An impatient Führer would order the takeover of Italy in 1944 early. This would provide a brief tactical advantage to the Reich, and they would make the most of it. Later in the war, the advantage would fade. So, by the way, in this moment, the Italians still take their turn, and then they also act as Germans the next turn. So it's a real extreme can opening situation. The first Type 11 U boats would launch. These are the ones that I'm so glad they rolled back. Just very, very difficult to deal with, as well as production of King Tigers and Total War Panzers. You have to actually eliminate the sub base out of Denmark in order to kill the subs. You can't touch them, not with destroyers, not with planes. You can't touch them. They're untouchable. That's not a joke. They would suffer a major defeat in Novgorod at the hands of the army, Red Army, and AA. Limited air resources in the presence of AA would lead the Wehrmacht to attack with panzers and artillery, along with infantry. Right there, you see that even the presence of an AA gun can really, throw things off and keep the planes out of a battle, which is extremely valuable, especially if there's any poor rolling, and suddenly you start getting into tanks, which is where we want to be. While still heavily favored, they would roll poorly and suffer huge losses in the second round of battle, with only two panzers able to retreat. So 10, 11, 12 versus 8, 10, 13, 14, and only two panzers, tanks make it out of the battle. Excuse me. The U.S. heavy battleship 96 would be sunk. I don't remember why it moved there. And the large landing in Holland would be defeated with heavy casualties on both sides. Italian U-boats now under German control would form a wolf pack and sink 5 American transports off Gibraltar in 91. U-boats and air would sink the UK transports in 110, responsible for the Holland invasion. RAF would decline to scramble. So that was a real low point for my logistics. That was poorly done. AG Army Group South would form in North Italy, supported by two panzers. Fourth SS, um, both and or either.
Black beans, like do the ground beef and mix it and put it over rice, or do it
Cheeseburger is fine. Uh, Fourth SS would be in Rostov along with four panzers, and the first and second Waffen would be in Belarus with the first Panzer. Scandinavia remains under Soviet control. Soviets continue with the mass tank buy as well as infantry and guard infantry. Small counterattacks are made in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Stalingrad has a large tank concentration. Karelian army withdraws from Norway to Finland. The Far East is lightly defended. Nippon would build a mix of naval and army units, with big prize being Yamamoto's sister ship Masashi. Japan would flank the Burma army with an amphibious attack on India from the naval base Kuang Sea, supported by land-based air. It would succeed. The Chinese western province would be attacked, and Japan would once again control all of China. the bulk of the IJN would move from their home waters to the Philippines with blockers screening the American fleet off of New Guinea in 46. America would repair their damaged capital ship in 97 and go with a heavy naval build, which would include a heavy battleship. After consulting with Churchill, the Americans would declare war on the neutrals. This would result in all neutrals to switch to pro-Axis. Spain would be the only neutral attacked. For some reason, their fighters, tank and arty, would be removed in edit before combat. I don't see any correction, so I'll check the game thread for more information. I may have missed it. Explanation added in last post. At any rate, the Med fleet would transport troops from Greece in 93 and conduct an amphibious attack on Spain, with units from Gibraltar joining in. Spain would easily fall, and evacuated South Italy and a lightly defended Yugo would also fall. Undefended South France would be liberated. In the Pacific, the fleet off New Guinea would move to Java and take control. Soviet Far East would be liberated by an amphibious attack, and a few smaller naval skirmishes would also take place. Another strong fleet would concentrate off of Wake, and new ships would launch off the west coast. Let's take a look at the map. All right, so let's see. This is the beginning of the turn. So this is the beginning of the turn. Let's take a look at Germany. Let's go in chronological order. Here's Germany starting off. And there's the transports, and these are pretty naked. Yeah, with those subs coming in, yeah. Yeah. Huh. All right, there is the beginning, fairly strong showing. Um, and there's the situation in the East. Let's see what happens after Germany goes. Um, After Germany goes, I can't, like I said, it's very hard to tell what's in these things. You'd have to go up here to the top. Third Waffen right there, second Panzer right there, second Waffen right there, first Waffen, first Panzer, um, first Waffen Panzer. So that's how you tell, but very difficult to read the map. They take out the transports. Two subs took out the transports there. Poorly done, Randy. Um, you know, pretty forcibly taking control of northern Italy. All right, let's go to Russia. What's Russia? Okay, Russia just skirmishes and withdrawals from Norway. Remember, they can easily go over with paratroopers. These guys right here, they can go across and recapture. Sometimes there's Higgins. Yeah, there's a Higgins boat right there too. It's very hard to stop. They can't go. Paratroopers cannot jump into a capital. So this is the Russian large force here. This has probably got 6 tanks in it. Yep, 6 tanks with a tank general, a bunch of extra dice there, and then trying to put some pressure into China, fighting that battle. All right, so let's go to Japan, finishing up. Okay, Japan spreads. The little plague takes back China. That's going to be all game long. We're going to be fighting over these 3 things. This was I don't know how I didn't see that. I kind of think I did see it and let it happen. And I think there's a reason. I think I wanted his ships way out of position, because as soon as this gets recaptured, he's got to go two spaces instead of 3. And that, I think, was interesting to me with the position of my Navy. So I'm not sure. Can't quite remember. There we go. And that's Japan. Stranglehold on Southeast Asia, as well as nothing too weak about the situation. Let's go here and we take over Java and we are there and we're going to be supported by the um, carrier and the two fighters there. Okay, and we go to 16 and we're building a fleet. There's my second auxiliary fleet coming in to play. Let's see where those guys go. How's the Atlantic look? Um, uh, Looks good. I mean, I took over. The Navy is a great Navy. I don't think he's going to be able to take that back. We'll see, I guess. I think that's a battle that continues and rages for the rest of the game. And Pyrrhic, a little token victory, not Pyrrhic, in Greece. All right, let's keep going. Nothing obviously for the Chinese. I don't think there's a nope, nothing there. And then down here, what did the British do? They're going to um, no need for the allies. Oh, there you go. There is a need, and we're going to skirmish with and make this a hot spot continually. And we do take it back, fall back, as well as surge forward. Yunnan. Okay, and then producing tanks, tanks, tanks. I usually don't produce tanks, but there are $5 in this game. So landing of planes, British planes, and all right, that's it. And let's keep going. What did the Italian? Oh, there's no Italians. Sorry, there's no Italians. This is that Italy is done. That's right. So big deal with that. What did the Anzac do? Anzac's going to. I don't think there's any over here. All right, and Anzac is going to join the fleet there, and I think that's just got taken over. Yeah, that just got taken over. So Money Islands are hot again with transports and aircraft carrier and an air transport waiting in the wing. All right, France. I don't think there's much to say about that. Let's go. French guys. No, nothing. All right, let's go on to round 10 and see what Barney has to say about round 10. Okay. China would continue their lessons in. Okay. Yes. China would continue their lessons in Japanese. UK would go a heavy army build with Paris and LCVs providing some flexibility. Another combined arms attack would take place in Holland, with the British winning decisively. The Burma army would turn around and liberate India. Smaller liberate India. Smaller battles would take place in 91 with two U-boats being sunk, albeit expensive with DD destroyer. Yunnan would see a solo tech bomber eliminated. Armor would be deployed in Egypt, and Spain would have a large RAF presence, Royal Air Force. Anzac would launch a aircraft CV and take an undefended Sumatra, as well as attacking blockers in 34 and 45. The elites in N territory, Northwest Territory, and West Australia would also be attacked. The attack on the cruiser in 45 would go disastrously wrong, with two Anzac fighters shot down and no damage to the cruiser. A sub would also be lost in 34. The main Allied Pacific Fleet is concentrated off of Java, and two fighters would land on one of their CVs there. The two French infantry in London would continue to chill and do PR work. All right, let's read some more. The Reich would go on with strong land buys, including King Tigers, to heavy Waffen status and produce two more. Total War mechs also would deploy a large number of infantry. The Normandy factory would be destroyed. Note this was done with edit as demolition charges were placed incorrectly. South France, South Italy, Bryansk, Caucasus, and Holland would all see combat. Caucasus and Holland would see moderate-sized forces clash. Germany would be victorious in all. The Swedish and Turkish armies would join the Axis. Army Group South would remain in northern Italy with strong Luftwaffe support. West Germany and Belarus would also see strong Weimar forces, with Sweden being heavily reinforced by LCV and Luftwaffe units to complement the Swedish army. The Soviets would go with mass tanks and ground infantry again, although I think the grounds may have been upgraded to total tank build. Guards, same cost. Combat would take place in Bryansk and Rostov, and a huge tank army would move into Caucasus. Singhai would also see battle. Soviet bombers would continue their outstanding combat record in Singhai, while Waffen-SS troops would inflict maximum damage in Caucasus as they pledged to continue allegiance to the Fuhrer while being obliterated by T-34 tanks. The first and second tank would now be in Caucasus. Kazakhstan would have a strong force. The Moscow's defense would be led by Third Corps. The First and Second Corps would form First Army Group in Finland. It would activate on U.S. turn. Looks as if they just went with the guards. I don't remember what happened here. I think Crockett wanted to put some dudes in the Finland factory. Yes, I think that's correct. Nippon would launch two carriers along with 4 naval fighters. A destroyer and escort would finish their naval purchase. The rest would go to infantry. Multiple small but significant battles would take place. Sumatra would be the riskiest, but it and all others would prove successful. China would be, again, fully subjugated. Task Force India would move to Singapore and meet with the ships who sailed from the Philippines. Expensive blockers would be used to block the large Allied fleet in 42 off Java from the Philippines. Singapore would offer battle, though. The home waters in 6 would be threatened by the American fleet stationed in Wake and the heavy bomber at Midway, but they would have a slight defensive edge with new construction proving much needed hit points. Although the new American fleet off the West Coast would prove yet another challenge that would soon need to be met. Uncle Sam would launch smaller support ships as well as infantry and artillery. A minor factory would be constructed in Spain. Combat would occur in West Europe as well as Greece, where 3 bombers would take on a SS Fallschirmjäger. Several small but important battles would take place in the Pacific. Also, the badass cruiser that shot down the 2 NSAC fighters would not go quietly into the night. It would shoot down a B-29 and sink a BDD destroyer before being itself sunk. In 42 Sea Zone off Java, the Allied fleet holds in place. The Wake Task Force has combined with the new construction off San Diego and has moved to Sea Zone 7. The Med fleet moves from 93 back to the Atlantic off Gibraltar in 91. Both RAF and now the Army Air Corps are heavily represented in Spain. Oh, shucks. The Chinese continue to compile their liquidation list for future use. Britain continues heavy land and parabills. Holland is once again battlefield with major RAF support. Both sides would roll poorly, but the Tommies would win handily. British pairs would drop into Norway and defeat their German counterpart. Both sides would lose 1 pair in this all-paratrooper battle. A tank and a mech combo would take Sinkiang, opening up a route to Szechuan for the Soviets. The Indian Army remains put. Egypt continues to produce tanks. As that goes on, all naval with another CV leading the way. 2 Japanese blockers would be sunk, but they would also suffer casualties as well. Borneo would be liberated. The English are growing increasingly annoyed by the French in London. So let's take a look at that. Let's see here. I think this is that. So let's go down and see what happened. All right, so here is the updated map. And we have a good naval force now in 110. That's going to stay there for quite a while, I think. And it's going to provide air cover for all of the operations throughout this area. But these the subs here, he continues to build them. They can't be defended against, something like that. It's kind of weird. I thought he said we won this battle. Huh. Thought we took Norway. Maybe it was this one. Nope. Hold on just a sec. Nope. That's huge. So big battle there for, let's go down here. So there's a move on Iraq, which was heavily defended. No, it wasn't heavily defended. Where'd they all go? Okay. Oh, they stay. Nope, he pulls back. And again, just trying to do the math here so I don't get quickly overwhelmed. Not easy, not easy. But all right, let's see what here we have the Russians moving through. This must be I think a guard unit where you can go through and an infantry that can move to. Then if this is the shield I'm throwing up to do battle here against also the Mongolian Japanese forces. And we have rescue coming from this side. Let's see what the Japanese do. All right, they continue to press in, keeping their focus on the Russians. And it looks, I mean, heavy presence, heavy naval presence. It was a grind. I mean, really quite a grind. Here, he's combined his forces, but I've also got this force off of the coast with reinforcements coming. Not that many reinforcements, but some. Oh, he took over Hawaii. Wow, look at that. Tricksy. All right. And fighting back. Got the Money Islands again. And I go off to India, figuring that no matter what kind of power he was bringing here, that India would survive if I had this navy here close by. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to pause recording. Man, this looks rough. I forgot about that. I just had my burger and potatoes, but this he's walking off of the money that he got from the capture of Calcutta, and it is a ocean of orange even after Anzac's turn. Bringing in Anzac infantry, got a bunch of fighters coming in. Trying again that whole pizza dough thing where I want a lot of action in this area, but I also want him to have to worry about this area, the north. So 3 destroyers put in, and then those in 1. All right. And trying to help the Soviets out with some repatriate or liberation. We're into Turkey at this point in time, and Turkey is actually safe. No challenges now. I'm going to wake up in a minute and start taking out the neutrals, Saudi Arabia and such. I think pretty soon he's going to actually press in on to Bryansk, which he does not do. I think he does it once. And look at the huge investment in Sweden. Obviously, the 7 infantry on account of the attacking the neutrals, but lots of investment here. Let's see what happens in the next round. Let's go here and let's go to Barney's late 44. Okay, so this one we haven't got to, so this is looking fantastic. Oh, this must have been last time. Okay, let's take a look. There is that one right there. This was previous. Okay, so I'm a little further on because these units are actually supposed to be up here with where I'm at. Let's see. Early 45, Germany would produce additional Tigers and total mechs but primarily infantry. They would also total buy air transports. Combat would take place in Western Europe, Norway, Bryansk, as well as Iraq. 99 off Cairo would see 2 U.S. transports sunk. Although they would shoot down a fighter, no major movement would take place in the front lines, and undefended Novgorod would be taken as the most significant result. Combat would inadvertently take place with edits on. So you need to click on edit while in history to see the results. The Soviet mass tank buy again. A rule misunderstanding would see only the total tanks built, but it would be corrected on Japan's turn, as well as a commissar. Combat would take place throughout Eastern Europe, including Turkey, Central Asia. China would also see battle. A risky battle in Bryansk with elite and infantry attacking a German mech would succeed, while the need to block was apparent. I think an additional infantry should have been deployed. All other attacks, except for the China battle in Shenxi, would see the Japanese air defeat tank and ground guard units are successful. First Guard would anchor the defense in Finland, while Moscow would have 3 corps leading theirs. First and second tank would remain in Caucasus. Japan would purchase a mix of units, but mostly for the army, including total war artillery. Multiple combats would take place in Southwest Pacific, Central Asia, Western China. The escort in the Philippines would be edited to Escort A, since it would be attacking a submarine without a DD. This prevents the escort from being able to target the submarine on attack. They may only do so on defense. Okay, I didn't know that. Hawaii only defended by an anti-aircraft gun would fall. The Southwest Pacific battles would heavily target Allied transports and sink forward. This would slow down future amphibious landings. The rest of their attacks would also prevail, including the reconquest of Borneo. The majority of the IJN would be off Philippines. Another powerful fleet would be in home waters, defending C-Zone 6 from U.S. Task Force in 7. The IJN would be concentrated in central China, not letting me post. Okay. Okay, so there's a bit of a, let me take a look at the map real quick. Okay, so here is after the German turn. So they recaptured Novgorod, backed out of Belarus, by the way, backed off the front line almost entirely, wheeling around to try to react to the Balkans, the possible invasion of the Balkans. Convoying, obviously valuable, and takes back these 2. This is going to be a constant fight. And my Navy stands strong. Okay. And there's a lot of units in Norway. I mean, you're thinking invasion at this point in time, but that's not what happened. And 9 transports are ready to go. I'm kind of not defending transports. All right, and let's see what happens when the Russians go. Okay, the Russians Turkey, and then this was a mistake, by the way. For some reason, the computer does this. Don't know why, but we would draw to Karelia. This is the first army group. It's not as weak as it looks. Let's see if I can find it. First Corps. Nope, first army group, which is there. It is right here. 9 infantry, 1 tank. So that's the first army group. And then we do battle and skirmish action and push. Here's a strong push into Japan, China. Try to make some ground there. And oh, we came out of Russia. All right. Let's see what happens with the Japanese. The Japanese respond and are victorious, but they have 1 tank left. A significant reduction of units. Obviously, no longer able to. I mean, Burma has 37 infantry at this point in time. This is strong, but we do have the Americans coming in and reinforcing. The hot action there, and and this is where okay, what will the Americans do with their forces? Oh, I didn't check the south. Let me just check what the Japanese did. And whoa, in the south. Okay, so we moved into 37. Oh, this is after the American turn. We moved into 37. We've got 3 Anzac carriers that'll join us in a minute. We have Sumatra again, and there is a lot going on. And now we've got this picket line of ships just about everywhere and really containing him. All right, let's see what happens in China. Probably nothing, I would assume. No, nothing. All right. Let's go down to the end of the British turn. The British have 6 tanks ready to do something. Okay, we'll just zoom in here. So after the American and British turn, we own all of Italy. We're blocking the Germans from retaking southern Italy, and we own France, and we've skirmished. And we are producing tanks because they only cost $5. These are mechs, special kind of mechs. And we finally venture off to Yunnan, really sticking our neck out there, as well as retaking all of Southeast Asia. That's a big moment. I didn't see that coming. Okay, and now let's see where we end up after all the turns. I think I might have done an edit there. And the French are almost, yeah, the French, there's not many French units left. Let me go over to Anzac. Escort, transport, reinvasion of Java, looks like. Airplanes, 5 American airplanes, 1 Anzac fighter. So right now the planes and the ships are separated. These carriers and the ships are separated. And the Anzac is actually holding the ground as a spine. I think there might be an aircraft carrier somewhere. There's another Anzac aircraft carrier. And here's what I like is Northern Action. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, so all right, so then this is another person's game. They do these cool recaps. Whoa, that's something. Russians. Oh my goodness. Russians are in Slovakia. Yikes. Oh, these are the armies, by the way. And it represents you lie them together in these boxes and that gives you more dice. Okay, and I'm trying to find where. Here's another one. Okay. I'm going to pause for a second. All right. So there's actually some background. There was a quite a delay, and he did other games as well. Now he's back, and he's sort of gone backward a little bit. I'm not sure why he did this. I didn't catch it at the time. Do you remember why those were removed long ago? I know. Well, it wouldn't affect the outcome. Maybe another hit or two for this Spain. Well, I just got burned on America's 30-minute turn report, so to take a bit to get back into it. Uncle Sam would go with a heavy army buy as well as an airbase for Espana. Strat bombers would do 17 damage to the North Italy factory. No interceptors would rise to challenge the five fighter escorts, and the AA would all miss their targets. Small battles would take place across West Europe and the Pacific. U.S. naval forces would be concentrated in 110. Large numbers of Army Air Corps would be based in Spain. Java Task Force would move to 39 off India with major air assets. So this is when the American forces are combining to make sure no one takes Calcutta. The Japanese DD would be sunk, but the islands remained under Japanese control. The 7th Task Force splits, with the majority going to 3 off Kamchatka and the others going to the west coast. There are 9 transports and 101 off the east coast. China continues to struggle for freedom. Well, the above isn't as good as what I wrote earlier, but whatever. America buys 2 transports and some army. They save 80 bucks. They save 20 bucks. So huge concentration of units there. And we're going to see the Russians come in here in a minute. Okay, major combat takes place in Greece. You can see 5 infantry, a fighter, 2 bombers, 3 fighters, a bomber, 3 tanks, and the infantry. And the Reich would prevail in a close fought battle. Holland and Iraq would see British victories. The Indian Army would once again move into Burma in force. UK would reinforce the Russians in Turkey and produce tanks out of their Egypt factory. Italians are looking forward to their arrival in U.S. prison camps. Anzac would produce ships for their navy and give battle to the Japanese escort and transport off Celebes with the sub and air attack. The attack would succeed, but with heavy losses, a lone fighter would be left after the intense combat. Their aircraft carriers would join the Americans in 39, with another supporting U.S. ship off Johnson Island. Okay, so I don't exactly remember what he's referring to. Celebes. Okay, let's go and see where we're at. I don't think we're there yet. I did split the transport task force right here, but I think we're back together. So I think we're one more ahead. Let's go to the Germans. Germans end of round 13, and they look like they're endangering Turkey, and they are back in Belarus in force, having brought their forces from Norway all the way forward. And they have recaptured all of Europe and Italy. But the Navy remains strong. Spain remains strong. 3 transports, 3 Higgins boats there. Okay, let's go down to the Russians. The Russians use their paratrooper. I rarely use those, but I did. And I cut them off. There should be some sort of tactical advantage to that. And we push into Xinjiang, constantly battling back and forth. Still in Karelia. Interesting. Okay, so then we go to the Japanese, and they are going to fight. I'm not sure what that is all about. The Americans liberate more. The home fleet is surrounded, endangered, strengthened. He does not retake all of China. Oh, first time, I think. Maybe the second time, but pretty rare. Ground troops here are only 6. That is kind of a big deal right there. The 37 have been eliminated. This is now sort of a real fight. Put a Chinese infantry on board. Nice. Okay. And this turn for tanks. Bombers coming in, reinforcing Turkey. Smolensk. Oh, there we go. Norway. Norway's been taken and reinforced, as well as all of that. Wow. That is compromised. Let me just go over to the East Coast. Okay, more transports. I don't think they're all being used to return. That's why there's continually there. And then let's go down to the Anzac, where they have. Okay, so we are still off Java and still within rescue of Calcutta, if need be. Convoying, blocking. Okay, that's a defensive action right there. All right, and up here. All right, let's go on to 14. Let's see what Barney has to say. The Reich purchases another Panzer army as well as moving a West German factory underground, upgrading it. Infantry repairs and heavy bomber also deployed. Type 11 would begin a new phase of U-boat war by getting a hit on a heavy battleship in 110. West Europe would see massive counterattacks supported heavily by the Luftwaffe. Novgorod would be taken to force with the 1st Panzer and 1st SS. A UK transport is sunk off Greece. The 1st SS Panzer would move to West Germany, and 2nd Panzer and 2nd and 3rd SS to Romania. The Scandinavian army moves to Norway. The Soviets would invest in total war tanks, and small combats would take place on the Eastern Front. Central Asia and Western China would also see combat, with Xinjiang seeing a moderate clash of forces. The Moscow army moves to Bryansk. This Japanese demolition charges are set at the bases in Hawaii. Support ships are launched for the Navy, with the rest of their resources going to the Army. Major battle in Xinjiang. This is what we saw earlier. So, major battle. Thank you for showing us that. And the end here. Okay. So about even. So let's keep going. Closely matched. Vishka and Siberia, Java, Celebes will also see combat. Japan will prevail in all. IJN would be above Southwest Pacific Islands, while the Philippines would see the greatest concentration of naval assets. The IJN would be concentrated. No, IJA, Imperial Japanese Army, would be concentrated in Kwikchow, preparing for potential battle against the British Indian Army in Burma. Uncle Sam would go on a heavy naval build that would include 2 carriers, 2 cruisers, and 4 total war fighters. I don't normally see cruisers built in our small play group, but they do have a value at $9 in the captain's mod, especially if you plan on large amphibious attacks that can't be blocked by bombardment. Free regardless. West Europe territories would change hands. U.S. naval fighters can open for the British in Shan State, albeit the loss of a fighter. Though, and Crockett learned early the risk reward of using them in battle. Siberia would see the largest battle, and USA would win easily. Portugal would fall to an amphibious landing with heavy armor support. There are a large number of U.S. ships scattered throughout the North Pacific. The task force off India moves to Singapore and is directly challenging the Imperial Japanese Navy units in Philippines. New ships continue to flood into the Pacific. The Atlantic Fleet remains in 110 in the English Channel. China hopes their new best friend, the British, can liberate some territories. UK buys tanks and mech. Would be a correction on the mechs. Crockett didn't realize he couldn't do total war builds in India. Still, the 5 mechs would be a good purchase. Small battle would succeed in Greece, and the Indian army would move into Yunnan strength. I may have missed something with an edit in Iraq, as the 2 tanks did move. No reason, or well, not a good one that I can see. They didn't move. It may have been changed in the future or just been missed. It happens in a complex game like this, or it's part of Crockett's master plan. At any rate, British tanks have taken control of Southeast Asia. Anti-aircraft guns are sent to Yunnan to support the 36 infantry divisions there. Not a whole lot going on in Europe. 6 tanks in Caucasus, and Cairo produced 3 more of the biggest moves. Anzac produces 3 tanks. Combat takes place in 46 with a sub sinking a low transport. The French continue as resentment grows. The graphics on this really hold up. Oh, this was a while back. For some reason, I think he's delayed. Yeah, this was a little bit of turn before, I think. Yep, when the fleet was here, 38, and the fighters were down here. The U.S. Navy moves to 38 from 37. I can't remember why. Because I had separated my Air Force from my Navy for a strike. I didn't want to expose my Navy. And the next turn, the Reich would go with 2 total war mech builds and large infantry and para builds. Tigers would be repaired, and another Type 11 U-boat would launch. A heavy bomber immune to AA fire would strike Moscow and cause 10 damage. Wow. North Italy, Greece, and southern France would be taken via counterattack. Normandy and Bessarabia would go down in defeat. A rule misunderstanding on my part would see southern Italy taken by paratroopers, but paratroopers are forbidden from attacking capitals, even if it's not under control by its original owner. This would be corrected. The Moscow factory would be repaired and moved underground. 3 British tanks will be activated via Lend-Lease. I finally figured out Lend-Lease. 3 partisans would prepare to become active in original Russian and now vacated Axis-controlled territories. Combat would succeed in West China and Central Asia. Partisans would cut ground lines of communication, GLOC, and Baltic states, East Poland, preventing German rail movements to Belarus. The Karelian Knot, anchored by 1st Army Group, would remain intact, as well as the Moscow force. So, oops, sorry. So still there. That is tremendously successful. I mean, obviously I'm about to lose it, but drawing a lot of resources in that direction. All right. Japan would go to mixed builds, fortifying their navy as well as the army in China and homeland. They would conduct numerous strikes in the Southwest Pacific, most notably being Singapore. Isolated naval units would be struck in 16. The main event would take place in Yunnan. So this one right here, wondering how this went. 16, 20, 24, 26, 30, 37, 38. No kidding. Huh. And the odds on this are 85% win with 7 defenders left. So mostly the aircraft. Oh, no, 10 attackers left. Okay, let's see how it goes. The anti-aircraft missed. And he walks away with a ton. He should have walked away with 10. He walked away with 11, 15, 17, 18. So he should have walked away with 10. He walked away with 18, 17. Crazy. But if you look behind him, look behind him. This is empty. No reserves. Whereas we have reserves with the planes as well as with the Russians. And some Russians over here. The IJN will be concentrated off Philippines, and in 6, the Army in Kwichao with strong mobile forces would go along with the surviving mobile units in Yunnan. The USA would go with total naval fighters and heavy armor infantry and Marine build. There was a correction. The Marine, I didn't understand the Marines. I still don't quite understand the Marines. It doesn't seem to give them much advantage. Numerous combats would take place in the Pacific and European theaters. Northern Italy would be taken with large bomber support. Normandy would see a dominating win. 112, a German escort would be sunk, and the U.S. infantry would take Norway. Japanese ships would be sunk in 37, as well as off the destroyer off of Hawaii, and it would take an escort with it. Wake and Hawaii would both be liberated. A daring all-fighter attack against 2 defenders in Java would result in the destruction of the Japanese, albeit at the cost of 2 fighters. Sakha and Amur are liberated. Sakha would have a moderate force of infantry and artillery. The main U.S. fleet would be in Sea Zone 7 and the Southwest Fleet off Java in 62. The Atlantic Fleet is primarily in 112. Troops continue to be produced in Spain and deployed via East Coast transports. The British would focus on bombers and tanks. Battle in Yunnan would see the Japanese victorious, but they would be heavily attrited, opening the way for a potential Soviet attack from Xinjiang. South France would also see heavy casualties, with the UK destroying the German presence there, but a lone RAF fighter would survive. British armor would move to Bryansk to block Belarus from Moscow. Soviet infantry would be edited to Moscow. That was there. Not sure why that was. Yes. So the Allies forgot a blocker, and then they realized they could get a UK tank there instead of what I think happened. So all good. Oh, this was yeah. He gave me a mulligan, so I appreciated that. 4 tanks, and I didn't understand the rail. There's quite an extensive in his version. The British can rail anywhere except the Western hemisphere. Unless it's blocked, it can. 4 tanks would deploy to India and 3 bombers to Egypt. Anzac would take the undefended Java, helping to boost their IPCs, which had fallen quite low. Let's see if I'm up to date here. I don't know if I am. I'm going to go over here. Java. Nope. Yeah, I'm going to keep reading because I'm not sure exactly where we are. Germany produces a double build of Total Mexican with a Tiger infantry and pairs for future sub induction also deploy. Future SS induction. The Kriegsmarine will launch another Type 11, bringing their total to 3. Combat throughout the Western fronts would take place. So busy, busy. Here, 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 here. I just noticed air was used against the partisans. That is incorrect. I don't know if that was corrected or not. I guess it was missed. I might be able to adjust partisans so air can't fire at them. I put it on the list of things to look at. He does programming. At any rate, all attacks would succeed. Belarus, Finland, and West Germany would see the largest concentration of Wehrmacht and Waffen units. Turkey and Rostov would be threatened by smaller but still powerful German forces. The Waffen army in Ukraine would mistakenly have an Oberfest 4 active instead of a 3. Don't know what that means, but he does. The Soviets produced a tank army, and a large number of combats would take place in both theaters. Most notably, the first army group moving to Novgorod, a large number of Chinese territories would be liberated, and while still a victory, they would suffer the loss of a tactical bomber in the retaking of Smolensk. I think they went a little light and could have used more infantry support there. I understand wanting to keep Moscow as strong as possible, but British armor was also in position to block that attack would be missed for counterattacks in the future. Moscow has one tank, the first tank and the third corps, both active, and able to form second army group when needed. First army group is threatened from Belarus as well as fast movers from Finland. Luftwaffe units from West Germany can also strike. Japan would build 2 aircraft carriers and total naval fighters. They also upgrade their airbase and round out their purchase with 2 tanks and the rest infantry. They counterattack in China but are unable to regain control of it. Naval units from the Philippines would move to home waters, and the army would concentrate around their factory in Kwichao. Some solo units would move into Soviet Asia to attempt to slow down the Americans and communist forces. So what happened was he won in Yunnan, and then I counterattacked with a bunch of tanks and wiped him mostly out, and that left him a bit low on ground forces, and he starts to lose. Obviously, I'm in China now significantly, and all of Russia, most of Russia is back with a large force in Sea Zone 7, as well as a force with the backbone of the Anzac cruisers in 42. USA would go to with Total War mechs, naval fighters, 2 CVs, and support ships. 4 armored infantry would be a big purchase for the army. North Italy and Normandy would see battle again, with the Americans taking both and absolutely obliterating the German force in Normandy with a massive air supporting the army. A few more battles on the Pacific side. All would be of the smaller variety, with New Guinea, Amur, and Buriacha being liberated. The Atlantic Fleet would move to 109, the South Pacific Fleet to 39 off Malaya. China is finally not under complete Japanese control. UK goes primarily army with a couple of transports for its build. A small tank battle in Greece would see them come out on top, and more tanks would take Yunnan. A solo tank would also defeat a lone infantry in French Indochina. Tanks and bombers would be victorious in Sinkiang. Tanks would kill the Soviet paratrooper in Caucasus as well. Anzac would launch a transport and a sub. An undefended Borneo is liberated. A fighter would lose a lone transport, but would sink a lone transport in 36, but be shot down. An undefended Borneo is liberated. That does not look like that's Borneo. So it must be below. Let's see. Right here. Here it is. Here's this undefended. There he is. So rapid, quite a rapid change of when he smacked into this, and then he had to withdraw to Kwichao, and now we have some projection of power as well as as well as just a fierce fight. I mean, it's battle raging everywhere. I mean, imagine having to manage this. That you're managing this, and these are not standing still. By the way, they can move and they can and have supported. They go one and then two and kill things. Then they come back. Of course, I don't know if I've got the bombers in place yet, but so these are very useful. And I've got another Navy coming. I mean, look at the naval builds here, as well as down here. So a lot of concentrated, a lot of money. These were insanely. I mean, it was a grind of win loss, win loss, win loss, and figuring that I had more money than the Japanese did collectively, I was able to expend and even lose battles and still come out ahead. What I call the Rocky Balboa strategy. All right, let's oh, and then over here I did one. Oh, no, sorry. I'll go up here. We'll take a look. And then here is, I don't know when this is. I think it's after the American turn, but obviously looking, quite good to see Allied. I'd rather see these colors than the other. I believe Karelia might be, the Karelia knot might have been finally defeated. But, and yeah, I did move out of Karelia and retook Novgorod, and I'm exposed to the Belarus army, obviously. So, but they did a lot of work in pouring and making people pour energy and resources into Scandinavia, and I've taken it. He's swung his way up to Finland, and then I've retaken it. So a lot of fun, a lot of fun. These king tigers are beasts, let me tell you. All right, let's keep going. And okay, and right now we have some money. Allies would have -7 for the islands as well as a -1 for partisan error in Yakut. Final total 171. They need 190, I think. This is 11 November 1st of 25. The Reich would go with all land bias, total Mac and Panzers, Panzer Grenadiers, and Paras. V2 rockets would make their first appearance. In a brilliant tactical move, the Luftwaffe would send a stealth bomber to bomb the harbor in Gibraltar. This would limit the 6 American transports in 91 to 2 movements. AAA will fire heavy bombers with anti-aircraft from the facility. Regular-based AA will not. If the AA should hit, simply edit the correct damage hand roll if against the major factory at the beginning of the non-combat and add the heavy bomber back in. A strong force would move into North Italy, led by first SS Panzer and 2 Tigers. 2 UK tanks in Greece would be destroyed by a heavy Waffen-Panzer and support units. Mech infantry with air support would kill the American task group or army group in TG. Tank General. That's what it is. Tank General in South France. Smolensk and Bryansk would follow with fighter aces or fighter ace lead the way. Normandy would change hands again, and defended Turkey would fall to the Fallschirmjäger. The main event would take place in Novgorod, where Soviet's First Army would finally clash with the Wehrmacht. The attacker is going to win. Odds would favor a German victory, but with a negative TUV swing. No kidding. All right. Yeah, this is rather complicated. AAA battle calc won't take potential AA hits or non-hit points of the AG flags into account. One can manipulate it by removing or adding units to get a closer result sometimes. The Reich would do slightly above average, but still win the day. Okay, so they would have negative 19 instead of. All right. Air transports will reinforce Vyborg. The Soviets would focus on armor for their builds. The Eastern Front would see multiple small combats take place, with Bryansk seeing a higher level of battle. Japan will also be attacked in Central Asia. All attacks would succeed, including taking control of Turkey. First Tank and Third Corps will be in Moscow with their ability to reform First Group. Second Tank would also have the ability to form in Rostov. The Far East would be stabilized with the help of American troops. Okay, I'm not sure which one this is. The first, and concerned by the Allied naval threat, Nippon would once again buy 2 carriers and total naval fighters, infantry, and a couple of fortifications would complete their build. The loss of control of China and most of Southeast Asia has them in a tough spot. Want Malaya. Malaya is one of my favorite places. Oceans. All right, let's keep going. Japan would be forced into riskier battles than they prefer. Amura would be taken with massive air support, but no loss of Japanese fighters. Yunnan would see a moderate number of units clash, and a Banzai attack would defeat the British tank in French Indochina. A huge naval battle would take place off Singapore, with the South Pacific Allied fleet being engaged by the Imperial Japanese Navy out of the Philippines. They would be supported by land-based air from the main Imperial Japanese Army base in Quicha. The battle would end up with expected results and be a major victory for the IJN. Japan would be feeling massive pressure from the giant American fleet in 7. The upgraded air base would be fully manned with 4 fighters and multiple CVs would help protect the homeland. These victories would give Japan a slight reprieve from the Allied threat. The Americans have already launched a new fleet from San Diego, with intelligence predicting even a larger number of ships to follow. I incorrectly purchased more naval fighters than allowed. It's corrected in the next turn up. It's player enforced. USA would go with total war infantry, bombers, and fighters, and had to make slight adjustment to placement. And undefended Holland and Celebes would both be taken. Normandy would continue to change hands, and a more the wrong Marine would attack, but it would have no effect on the battle and would be liberated. Like I said, the Marines have to be paired with an artillery on a 1-to-1 to get their bonus to attack. If they're attacking without an army, you need to switch to Marine A1, or they will attack at a 2. They both defend correctly. So not impressed by the Marine role. A 50-50 battle between an arty and an infantry in Dutch New Guinea would see Japan win. Iwo would see both sides ground units killed, so Japan retains control of the territory. When bombarding with a heavy bomber battleship, and there's only one land unit, you'll need to hand roll, as the heavy will roll 2 dice. The American air will strike France, killing the German infantry in Para, but importantly, it would keep France under German control. The Germans would be defeated in South France, but would put up a good fight. The Atlantic Fleet has moved back to 110, and major air assets are present in UK. 4 bombers, 5 fighters. Spain continues to be a forward area for deployment. Iwo has the main American fleet, and Wake, with its naval base, adds support. Total war bombers and fighters are deployed on the west coast. China produces 2 infantry, and with vengeance, the lone infantry attacks a Japanese infantry in Kiansu. Both are killed. UK would build 2 fighters and match their infantry build of 5 with 5 artillery. Bombers from Kazakhstan would make a daring raid on a damaged ship in 37 off of Singapore, sinking 2 battleships and a CV, while 2 bombers would be shot down. Solo tank versus infantry. Solo infantry attacks would both succeed in Suiyuan and Hopai. Anzac would build an air transport as well as a harbor for Western Australia. The powers that would change their mind and cancel the harbor build in favor of two subs. An undefended Kwang Tung would be taken by amphibious attack. Dutch New Guinea will also see a sea attack, defeat the Japanese infantry there at the cost of an infantry themselves. Anzac subs and transports would be scattered throughout the Southwest and Central Pacific. South Pacific and Central Pacific. Two French infantry end up in Spain. All right. Let's see if we can see this. So all right, I think there's a Pacific one. The Pacific at this point in time is actually really, really complicated, really interesting. Um, you've got American and oops, you've got American and Russian units scattered throughout the top here, and then you've got China infiltrated as well as this right here was really good. The bomber I think came from Moscow, and the units that were here were sent as a trap, and I was hoping to get them to basically zero them out eventually, and I was fortunately able to accomplish that. Um, and that was it. That was the only possibility of me taking them out, which of course makes this battle even more important. Okay, so let's keep going. The economy at this point in time is um, 224. And I think I'm 11 off. And the right goes with Panzers and mech buys. The damaged Tigers are repaired, or V2s. Western Europe, Eastern Europe, skirmishes, Bryansk, and South France, as well as Normandy. Another U-boat strikes. Um, they know they can retreat to their sub-pen in West Germany. $7 one. It's nice to see some Allied counter other than physically taking over territories. It'd be nice to see some sort of Allied counter other than physically taking over the territories they are based at. My experience is only buying one, maybe two a turn. East Front requires so many resources. I guess it all depends on the game and the situation. The Allied commander in Gibraltar would fail to secure their air defense and once again suffer a heavy bomber damage. The German counterattack in Normandy would suffer huge losses and not take the territory despite killing all the Allied forces. Southern Italy would be taken over by a Tiger tank. Another close battle in Turkey and the Reich would retreat back to Greece. Whether this was planned or unknown, but the Reich would gain a small TUV win. I think pressing the attack here would have been a way to go. Allied air and transport 93 and 99 would have most likely killed them in a counterattack, though. Still, it has $2 and it will make them react to you. At any rate, they retreat to Greece with a positive TUV. So he attacks this, takes a lot out, and then falls back to Greece. Bryansk is another tough fight. Huh, okay. While not huge numbers, it was more than just one or two. But the Wehrmacht would secure a decisive win. Holland would easily be taken. South France would see another decisive victory. First, SS Panzer would go to France and West Germany. Belarus, along with Greece, would be heavily reinforced. The Soviets would go with an infantry build, including guard units. Combat would take place in Urals Caucasus against the Waffen Paras. Both attacks would succeed. Two undefended Chinese provinces would be liberated. Almost the entire Red Army is now concentrated in Moscow. Japan buys a heavy battleship, carrier, naval fighter, and destroyer, as well as infantry and fortifications. 10 combats would take place, all involving small forces, but of tactical importance. The odds would be extremely close in a number of battles. Japan felt like it had no choice but to engage, as the Allies would be able to continue their breakout in China otherwise. Solo transports would be the naval targets, while almost all available Allied land targets would be attacked. While they would suffer some losses, all attacks would succeed. Air transports would reinforce Singapore, Philippines, and Quichao. The IJN would move to home waters to face the threat from the U.S. Navy that is anchored off Iwo. Japan's in a tough spot there, but their navy remains strong, and their counterattacks in China are able to hold the Allies off for now. U.S. repairs capital ships and buys 10 bombers. A paratrooper from Spain takes North Italy, and Albania is conquered by an amphibious attack. Both were undefended. Superior air power would help defeat South France, and a bomber attack in Archangel would succeed. An all-bomber attack. On the Pacific side, small naval battles would take place, and the fleet would move to the Marshalls and occupy it. Bombers were deployed to Spain and eastern United States. The Atlantic fleet remains in 110. The Channel. While the desire for revenge is strong, China refrains from attack and begins to rebuild their army. The British repair half of the damage to the Gibraltar air base, making it functional. Bombers and a mixed army build complete their purchase. Risky attacks in Burma and Southern Italy would see both see success. The neutrals and Saudi Arabia would easily fall, although a British tank would be lost. The bombers would deploy to Egypt and the army units to India. Anzac would invest in another carrier and a fighter. A solo tank would defeat a single elite infantry in Borneo. Right against the wall right there, huh? Oh, look, empty. I don't think it's ever been empty the whole time. But there's so much right here that the other side needed it, I guess. Oh, wait. So I'm moving around, and of course I've got a sub screen right here. I've got a sub over here. I own the Money Islands, and we're making headway here. But I think I have builds. I think I might have builds in, sorry, right there. No, that's an Anzac. Sorry, British factory, American factory, and I don't think I own that. Okay, so let's go back. It's a lot easier just to. Here is the money 224 versus 155, 175. There's Pacific Island bonuses. All right. Early 48. Germany buys Total War mechs and panzers and mix of land units. Another Type 11 sub joins the fleet. Spain factories bomb. V2s are fired at southern Italy, southern France, northern Italy, and Albania would be attacked. Most of the combats on the Eastern Front would take place in the north, with Turkey also being attacked. The rockets miss their target and do no damage. The air attacks succeed, but North Italy and Albania would take heavier than expected casualties. The Type 11s would score 2 hits and would draw to the subpen. The Wehrmacht would activate 2 Lend-Lease fighters from Britain. A tank general and a guard unit would also produced along with an elite and an arty. Some confusion about Lend-Lease works would take place and be corrected in game threat. Small battles would take place in Smolensk, Bryansk, and Tambov. The first 2 successfully blocking the German army in Belarus from Moscow. Tambov would see a stubborn mech do the Fuhrer proud, dying for the Vulture land, destroying 2 Soviet infantry and a guard unit, which would leave the territory in German control. Third and First Corps would be in Stalingrad with the majority of the Red Army in Moscow, led by Second Tank. Japan goes with a heavy infantry build and a couple of DDs, also an LCV to join attacks against Soviet Asia. This is Higgins' boat. LCVs land in South Far East and Siberia. A DD would land elite in undefended Alaska. A risky battle in Singhai would see Japan prevail due to air superiority. Japanese air would also sink in Australian transport off of Borneo. The entirety of the IJN is now in Season 6, except for a lone escort stationed in the Philippines. Singapore is reinforced via air transport, and Qichao remains the main Japanese base in China. All right. USA repairs their capital ships in Spain factory, and they move the factory underground. A mixed build would follow with a CV and a DD, carrier and a destroyer, as well as infantry and artillery, 4 fighters and 3 LCVs. The Higgins boats will be produced, and I think the LCVs may change, as Crockett didn't realize they could only be produced in one's capital. Combat takes place in Normandy, South France, Turkey, Alaska, Carolines, also sea battle. 3 bombers would team up to kill an elite in Alaska, but 1 would be shot down, and Japan would still control the territory. Turkey would be a success, albeit a loss of 2 bombers. However, it would prevent a devastating German breakthrough into the Middle East while giving them the same opportunity in the Balkans. South France and Normandy succeeded as expected. The main event would take place in the Carolines. A minor adjustment would take place, but the result would be an Allied American victory. The Japanese stronghold, the Central Pacific, now belongs to the American Navy. Naval reinforcements would launch off the West Coast, and the Atlantic Fleet remains in 110. And the Spain factory continues to produce units for the front lines. Transports launch off the East Coast. Japan has originally planned to destroy the naval base in Carolines, but the commander panicked under pressure and forgot. The air base should have been dusted too, with all the bombers flying around, but the naval base cost would be a turn where Japan must defend Tokyo instead of another build. Well, these things happen in war. The Japanese commander did the honorable thing, committed seppuku. China would continue to recruit to their army and waste no time in their quest for vengeance against the Japanese. And unsuspecting infantry would be attacked and killed in Singhai with no Chinese casualties. The army doubled in size with 2 infantry regiments recruited in Kansu. The UK builds a factory, fighter, 3 bombers. Crockett sure does like his bombers. Not sure why edit was on. It's easy to confuse things with the amount of edit needed, or sometimes one just forgets. Anyways, an undefended Greece would be taken. 50-50 artillery versus infantry battle in Yunnan at Shan State would see them split, with Yunnan remaining in Japanese hands. The combat in Albania would kill the SS paratrooper there at no loss. India would gain strength with a large number of Allied bombers stationed there. Infantry would rail from India to Caucasus to block the Germans in Rostov. It is done with edit, so a bit hard to follow in history. That is okay, though, just a heads up for anyone following the game. Turkey is reinforced. Anzac buys a fighter and a bomber. They would send a sub to attack the escort in 35, and both would be sunk. Transports just everywhere. Transports here, here. And finally, some pressure off of Moscow. And then here, this is the breakout into Alaska. And here, as I dive into the Carolines, have to rebuild over here, bombers. Obviously, strong income right now for the Allies. Obviously, 215. It's been higher. Germany would go to Total War Panzer and air transports builds for 6 Panzer Grenadiers. They continue their Type 11 purchase and add one of those super subs and add a few infantry and artillery. Combat takes place in the western and eastern fronts, as well as Albania and the Balkans. They would be able to encircle Moscow by taking an undefended Vologda and Samara with minimal force, the latter being taken by a lone SS infantry from Rostov. The 11s would hit the Allied fleet and 2 other U-boats and a fighter ace engage. and would prevent the 11s, and a fighter ace engaged an American DD destroyer in 112, which would prevent the 11s from returning to their pens. All attacks succeeded. Belarus and Rostov would both have strong force concentrations, with 2nd Panzer and 2nd Waffen in Belarus and 1st Panzer and 1st Waffen in Rostov, after it was heavily reinforced with panzers from West Germany via air transport. So they can fly tanks via air transport. West Germany would also continue as the main force in the West. The Soviets would add a contingent of Guard infantry and also infantry units as other infantry. They would mop up the minor breakout in Vologda and Samara. Heavier combat would take place in Bryansk. 2nd Tank engaging the moderate German force there. The largest battle would be in Rostov, where 1st Tank and 3rd Corps, supported by 3 tanks, 1 pair, and 2 fighters, would clash with 1 Panzer, 1 SS, and a large Luftwaffe presence. This is going to be a round-robin attack, and that's why I'm doing it. It's going to be a round-robin where I believe I'm going to come out ahead with 3 different armies involved. The Rostov battle would be fought incorrectly as the tokens were sent to battle. I would refight the battle with which would have a surprisingly similar outcome. Rostov would hold on, but only with German air surviving. This would prove decisive as America would launch an amphibious attack through the Dardanelles supported by the bombers and kill the surviving German air. I had been planning this for so long. It was crazy. The British would then launch their own amphibious attack and liberate it. Russia is still hard-pressed, but Moscow is safe. The threat of a German outbreak from Rostov is removed. Japan produces a couple small naval blockers and infantry with 2 tanks. Philippines would continue to be fortified. An LCV Banzai attack would land in Amur, that's the Higgins boat, and the resurgent Chinese would see battle in Kansu and Singhai. The Aleutians and Iwo would both be taken by DD transported infantry, while Shan State would also have combat as well. All attacks are successful. Air transports reinforce the Philippines, and the IJN remains in home waters in a decisive posture. In China, remaining air is concentrated in Quichao with its factory built of 2 infantry and 2 tanks and an infantry. Yunnan has a moderate force led by 2 tanks. Singapore remains adequately defended and coastal factories added to their previous infantry belts. Japan is threatened from multiple directions with Allied fleet off Carolines combined with Allied bombers and subs throughout the theater, causing the most concern. USA repairs their capital ships and buys total war infantry. They also add to their air force and navy, including a cruiser. They would be involved in a large number of combats, over a dozen battles taking place, most of small numbers of units or undefended territories involved. The aforementioned Rostov battle would be the biggest. Air attacks against Finland, South France, and northern Italy would destroy all German forces with the loss of 2 fighters in southern France. South Italy, Normandy, and Norway would all be taken. In the Pacific, the Aleutians are liberated. Blockers are sunk in 37, 17, and 18. Kiansu and Kwantung see them victorious as well. The fleet moves to Sea Zone 20, and Japan is ringed by destroyers. I am rather proud of this accomplishment. I don't know, pretty cool looking. The Higgins boats actually come ashore, by the way, and they can be taken as casualties. Kind of odd. The naval units deploy off the west coast, and the infantry prepare for sea transport to Europe. UK goes with a heavy land build, highlighted by 2 tanks along with 2 fighters. Combat takes place in Caucasus, North Italy, and Burma. All battles are won, and now undefended Rostov is liberated. All air units reinforce Moscow, primarily bombers. These forces remain highly dispersed, but their network of global factories and a nice 67 IPC's payday allow them to continue to effectively influence the war. Anzac goes with all naval build, and undefended Siam is conquered by an infantry that was on a U.S. transport. Carriers from Caroline joined the American fleet at 20. A French infantry in Spain takes an undefended southern France. Viva la France! Some adjustments were made in edit. Looks as if it was for the Rostov battle, according to the comment log. So a round robin attack on Rostov there was rather complicated. But blue Okay, and okay. It felt like the real war, I gotta say. I mean, it felt like just a slugfest, just back and forth, back and forth. And I was inspired by the actual war that the Americans devoted 60% of their resources to naval and air units and only 40% to ground. Um, so, and those can be just everywhere, uh, which is, awesome. And we've recaptured Alaska, and we have units there that can be picked up and taken places. And we have a new Navy coming into play, as well as this ring of destroyers. His planes would have to hit these because this is circled by destroyers. Although he's back here, my goodness, he's got China. The only Chinese place is Kiangsu. That's right. I had to make a decision here, and I chose to, and I made a choice so I could get reinforcements from the Chinese. I think interesting battle, really quite. All right, let's go. Fun stuff. 8 points away from economic victory. The right goes with mech panzers and air transports, as long as well as some infantry in Paris. The Ruhr factory has moved underground. That's West Germany. Combat takes place throughout Western Europe and South Europe. Eastern Front sees the Wehrmacht move into Bryansk in force. The V2s would miss their mark in southern Italy. All other attacks would succeed. And the Type 11s subs attrite the Allied fleet. First, Waffen, and I think it means that they damaged these carriers and this battleship. First, Waffen and his first Panzer lead the way in Bryansk. And now we're back. We're back right up against the door for Moscow. This is a constant concern to make sure that I was right. I was not going too far out because they could travel so fast. Soviets replaced some guard units that were lost as well as some paratroopers. A minor combat in Rostov would be successful. The Red Army has been forced to turtle in Moscow, although their paratroopers are able to threaten offensive action. Nippon is hard pressed by the Allies. They buy some naval blockers, a couple of fighters, and infantry. They would break into undefended Central Asia territories, but not in force. American destroyers would be heavily targeted. The army would gather what they could to move into Burma. Okay, going for a last chance. Their China Air Force remains in Kwichao, and the factory there produced 3 infantry. The enormous Allied fleet off Hong Kong remains its biggest threat, but is temporarily blocked. The Americans go with a heavy naval transport belt, along with air and armored units. The significant combat would take place in northern Italy and Ukraine with 11 bombers deployed there. Singapore would be liberated and forced. A small landing in Soviet Far East would be defeated. Ukraine would see the destruction of the German force, but with heavy losses, including 4 bombers. No land troops would survive to take control. North Italy would be a close battle, but superior American air power would defeat the German panzers. Britain would go with land units and fighters. A moderate sized but important battle would take place in Burma. The British Indian Army would prevail in a close fight thanks to their air power. Lancaster and a Spitfire would attack a Soul tank in Samara, and all units would perish. A German Fallschirmjäger, including a SS battalion, would be defeated in the Caucasus, but with heavy casualties for the British. Anzac would go with an all-transport purchase. A Japanese tank in Siam. Hold on a sec. I'm going to pause this. A Japanese tank in Siam would be destroyed by air units. The combined Allied fleet is not concentrated in 37 off Singapore with numerous single ships spread throughout the Pacific. All right, let's take a look here. I mean, back and forth. Right up against the door again. 37. Oh, wow. The Japanese are up here. The Allies continued 170. No, a ways away now. Germany builds total war mechs and repairs two panzers. They get the Type 11 U-boats get 4 hits. Um, Northern Italy is captured. The Wehrmacht, with support from the Luftwaffe, would regain control of Normandy. Rostock would change hands to German control once again. Some minor corrections to the Allies would take place at the end. The Soviets go with total artillery. Small combat would take place along the Western front. There we go. I like these pictures. Very helpful. The Smolensk and Vologda attacks would fail. The lack of Soviet air power is hurting their ability to counterattack. Weimar's hard against Moscow. The heavy losses of the Luftwaffe are proving key to Soviet survival. Japan would place demolition charges at the harbor in Quick Sea and go with heavy infantry builds along with a couple of naval fighters and a DD, doing everything they can to keep the Allies at bay until the Reich can mount its attack against Moscow. Small, desperate combats would take place in Burma, Shan State, Kwangtung, where the odds are very much up in the air. Massive air from Japan and their CVs and their carriers in six would hammer the American picket line of ships in the North Pacific. An undefended Midway and Wake would be taken by destroyer transported infantry. The Shan State and Burma battles would see mutual destruction. A naval fighter would be lost in the North Pacific, sinking a carrier. The IJN remains in six, and the Army controls all of China again. Americans control their damaged capital ships and begin construction of minor factories in Alaska and Turkey. Naval, air, and infantry builds round out their purchase. The U.S. would send out an all-out attack order to all units in the field capable of striking Allied Axis units. This would be highly successful. Over 19 combats. Anything that moves, shoot it. Here, here, here. All over here. Here, here, here. Army Air Corps bombers would absolutely devastate German forces all along the Eastern Front. Two bombers here, two bombers here, two bombers here, two bombers here. Kwangsi would be liberated and getting China back in the fight. The U.S. would go with tanks, max air for its build. A half a dozen key battles would take place with northern China and the Balkans being the most important. They would take control of an undefended Norway with tanks landing from American transports. Anzac would continue to build, and I think I landed. So that is 8 more units for the defense of Moscow. That's one of the Anzac would continue to build its navy, but would be unable to engage any Japanese force. It would not matter. The combined Anglo attack by the US and UK would push the Allies to an economic victory. 189 right on the nose. And this is where I began to attack. I had already attacked Saudi Arabia, and I think there was another one down here. Chile. I attacked Chile and took over Chile, and that gave me enough. Congratulations to Crockett. Tough game for Crockett. Persevered through adversity and got the win. Victory had to withdraw around 43-44. Um, Enjoyable game, and Panzer and I were impressed with Crockett's, to us, somewhat unorthodox play style. He definitely wasn't risk averse. A few key points that Kurlian not proved harder to untie than Panzer and I originally thought. This tied up a lot of German resources and provided us, the Soviet Union, with additional income for half the game. The early naval loss, and more correctly, Pyrrhic victory for Japan off of Singapore, really slowed down Japanese expansion in the Pacific. The loss of two carriers was significant. The Soviet bombers would have several key wins, but the most impactful was the sinking of the Axis naval blocker in the Med, which would lead to the destruction of the large Axis fleet in 97. The Allied attack on the true neutrals was unexpected. I originally thought it was a mistake, but it would open Spain as a major base of operations, as well as provide access to easy neutral IPC money to the Allies, primarily in South America and the Middle East, which helped push the Allies to the economic total needed for victory. Crockett made great use of air power, especially bombers. I kept wondering where they were all coming from. There's the final save. Fun game, everyone, and Merry Christmas. So it turned out, I will say that the Spain kind of fixes the map. So normally speaking, um, you have to go here and then wait and then go there. But because of Spain, you just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Whereas in all other, like for instance, in General Hand Grenades thinking, you need transports here, 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 and here. It goes here to here, drop off. They hand it off to here. This guy picks it up, goes here, drops off. He comes back, picks up, and drops off. So 4 different areas in order to land in southern France. Um, Whereas this is one. That's it. Done. They're in the continental Europe. And then you do this thing and just, try to wiggle for position. All right. Well, that was I was sick today, and that was what I chose to do with the day. So I'll go see if Schulte has made his moves and just chilling out. So I hope you enjoy this. It was a fun game. There are some different rules. There's a bit of a learning curve. For the most part, I did this not depending on the new rules because I couldn't. So, and that did hurt me on occasions. But so, anyways, very enjoyable game. Thank you, Panzer. Thank you, Barney. It was a good game. Let me just look and make sure. Yep. So thank you so much, and have a great day, and prepare yourself for a lot of snow if you're in Eastern United States. Okay, correct.